We are back here on Selection Sunday recording this podcast here. The brackets are in our hands. We are getting ready for the NCAA tournament. Join me once again for some March Madness coverage here. You see him now on the Carton Show as the researcher on FS1. Troy Mauriello is here. Troy, how are you?
I'm doing well, Mike. Always a pleasure to come on this show and talk about the best couple of days of the year, which is the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I got to get a little inside scoop here. How is the show prep going over there at the Carton Show for the tournament? As they still busy access NL free agency right now.
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna do much bracket talk. I'm sure maybe we'll do Final Four picks and stuff like that. But yeah, with NFL free agency starting up, and of course, the Aaron Rodgers saga that kind of dominates the headlines every day. So I think that'll be kind of the focus. But hopefully, we can squeeze a little bit of college basketball talk in there.
Yeah, absolutely here. And we could start looking here at this bracket here. And I think obviously the Field 68 was dropped a couple hours ago on CBS here. And I think for the most part, it's going to do a pretty good job.
I think so too. We were talking before, some of the teams that got left out, they all had their blemishes. And I've said this to you before, I think last year. If you're on the bubble, you're on the bubble for a reason. It's because you're not, a very good team. You're probably a pretty mediocre team if you're not one of the 30 or so teams that's for sure going to get an at-large bid. Rutgers, Oklahoma State, Clemson, all of those teams had some blemishes on their resume. Surprising that maybe a team like Nevada got in over them, NC State as well. Some people said, but for the bubble watch, nothing really shocked me there. And like we said, the one seeds and the two seeds, I think we kind of knew what they were going to be going in. On the one line, obviously, and then on the two line with UCLA, Marquette, Texas, Arizona. Nothing really shocking there. Not really a whole lot of debate there. So nothing really shocked me this year. If I had to pick something, it would probably be Rutgers not getting in because I thought they were going to get in after that win against Michigan last week.
I think we had a great point at the bubble. We'll talk about Rutgers in a minute too. But in terms of this might have been the softest ball of all time.
Mhm.
We had no bid thieves in any league, really. I mean, all these high powered teams that you could have been that could have taken up their leagues won. I mean, Memphis at the time they got to the final was not really a bid thief when they played Houston there. I mean, Florida
Mhm.
Atlantic won their league. Charleston had an at-large case. They won their league.
Yeah.
You're not looking at much in terms of that. Oral Roberts, another one that could have made a theoretical case. I mean, they all won their leagues.
And to that point, I mean, I think they revealed at the end of the show the first four out, and North Carolina was third. I mean, that should tell you how weak the bubble was this year. That a North Carolina team that had no business being anywhere near the NCAA tournament, they were really considered, I guess, or one of the final teams considered to make the field of 68. That should tell you how weak the bubble was this season. And like you mentioned, really, I have to say Champ Week was not the best this season. A lot of blowouts, especially in the title games, and like you mentioned, not really any major bid thieves or anything like that. So kind of I don't want to say boring, but a less entertaining Champ Week kind of led to less bid thieves and then a weaker bubble.
I think that does pay off as a turn though, because they got a lot of these high quality mid majors, the 12-13 lines. You'd be in line for a lot of these upsets, considering how wacky this middle of the field has been over the year.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, you have a lot of teams like you mentioned on that 10, 11, 12 line. VCU or Roberts, big
Charleston.
Utah State. Yeah, there's a lot of teams on the Kent State is another one that I love on the 10, 11, 12, 13 line. These teams that maybe would have not made it if they had lost their conference tournaments, like we mentioned, and are going to play some higher level teams in the first round or the second round, and can pull some upsets that people might not know about them.
Yeah, let's take a quick look here. Some of these things here. Look at the last four teams in here. So right now, the last four in are playing in the first four here. Mississippi State and Pitt, then Arizona State and Nevada. Arizona State feels like the buzzer beater they had against Arizona,
Yeah,
just enough to get them in the field.
yeah, yeah. And with Nevada, I thought I saw somewhere that they weren't even holding a watch party or anything like that. They did not think that they were going to get in. So really surprising to me that they got in. And then you're talking about Pitt, a Pitt team that a couple of weeks ago had a chance to be the number one seed in the ACC, and now because of their performance against Duke in the ACC tourney, they're in the last four, and they're playing on Tuesday night in the first four. Tough job for them to kind of for really a great season for them. And then in the last week, it kind of almost all falls apart and they almost fall out of the field.
Yeah, absolutely here. And then we'll take a look here at the first four out here. And then I did think this is interesting from the committee revealing that these were the four teams in the specific order that did not make it here. So So if you're obviously Oklahoma State, obviously victim of the brutal Big 12, got swallowed up by too many losses in
Yeah.
the league. I need to ask
Hmm.
directly by the committee chair on the
Hmm.
selection of what went wrong. Oklahoma State. So you know what? You play 18 quad one games, you got to win more than six.
Yeah.
Rutgers is the big surprise to me. I feel like they should have been in the field. They're certainly able to win big games. North
Hmm.
Carolina, first ever preseason number one, not to make the field, and they're so salty. They didn't even go to the NIT. They turned the invite down.
Yeah, with Oklahoma State, like you mentioned, I mean, they were 3 games over 500, 18-15, 8-10 in the league. Big 12, they were the best conference this season by far, in my opinion. But when you go 8-10, and when you win 18 games and you lose 15, you don't have much of a case. Rutgers, like you mentioned, a couple of big wins for them, but at the end of the day, a really bad loss to Minnesota. They were 3-7 in their last 10 games, 2-8 or 2-6 in the last 8 regular season games. They really limped to the finish line. Like I said, I thought that win against Michigan was going to do it for them in the Big Ten tournament, but I think we're kind of seeing, and we kind of saw it in Duke's case as well, staying on the 5 line. These conference tournaments maybe don't have as much of an impact to the committee as we thought, at least in some cases. And I think in Rutgers' case, you see that. Everyone kind of said when Rutgers won that game against Michigan, they were probably okay. Turns out that they were not. North Carolina, I mean, like we said, just a really dismal season for them. And then Clemson, I mean, Clemson passes the eye test when you look at them and their resume, 14-6, 23-10 overall. Like they had a good season. They win 23 games, but at the end of the day, just not enough big wins for them. They had a brutal loss against Louisville. And if you look at the net, they were 60th in the net, and they had 4 quad 3 and quad 4 losses. That's enough to sink you if you're a team that's on the bubble.
Yeah, Rutgers had 4 quad 4 losses this year. I believe it was Temple,
Mm-hmm.
Seton Hall, Nebraska was in there as well in the Minnesota game you
In
mentioned.
Minnesota. Yep. Yeah,
I
just there's too many bad losses for them.
I would have put them in over a team like NC State, which I don't understand why they're in. North Carolina is not. You look at this. I mean, they basically had the exact same resume, except I think they went 1-6 in quad one games, except for in North Carolina 1-9. I mean, they didn't even win in the Force Four. They were clearly in the field. So I don't know what the committee saw in them.
Yeah, shocking with that one with NC State. And I think they went 0-3 against Clemson this year as well. So just really surprising that, like you said, they're not even in the first 4. They are in the field. And Clemson wins 2 more conference games than them and beat them a couple of times during the season. Really surprising that NC State was not even on the bubble.
I will say also, I think one thing I'll point out before we move on here, just look at some of these regions here. Non-conference scheduling. Like this kills these teams year after year after year. I feel like it's a big reason why Rutgers is not in here as well, because their non-conference schedule number, I think, was in the 300s again.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, they did not play anyone in the non-conference. Really didn't pick up any notable wins in the conference, or I'm sorry, outside of the conference. They had a bunch of wins in conference, but at some point it's just not enough. And maybe that loss to Seton Hall for Rutgers, which ended up being a quad 3 loss because Seton Hall lost to DePaul the other day. If you're a Rutgers fan, you probably don't like Seton Hall. You're probably rooting against Seton Hall, and that could end up being the thing that knocked them out of the tournament. Seton Hall falling to a quad 3 loss. So tough draw for Rutgers, but at the end of the day, you have to schedule better in the non-conference. I've said this probably on this podcast a couple of times and for years. Schedule tough in the non-conference. Play 4 or 5 really tough games in the non-conference. Play in as many big tournaments as you can. There you really have nothing to lose. A loss to a top 25 team or a quad 1 loss, that's not going to hurt you in November and December. It can only help you if you win those games. And Rutgers, like we said, scheduled just really, really poorly, and it ended up hurting them.
Yeah, no, you talk about this with your alma mater for years now. We'll see
Yeah,
if a certain coach decides to make his way over make the drive down from Wingfoot to take over. I think the schedule will improve for them.
yeah. Something tells me if that coach makes that drive down, they will be scheduling a lot tougher in the non-conference than they did in the previous 4 seasons.
Still wild though. Rutgers wins at Purdue. They can't even make the field with that win.
Yeah, it's crazy. They beat one of the number 1 seeds, one of the top 4 seeds, and they don't get in. Yeah, but just not enough in the non-conference and too many bad losses for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, so let's go ahead here. Let's go region by region here. So Troy, what region are you feeling here? Where do you want to start?
Let's start in the top left. Let's go to the south.
All right, so let's go to the South region here. First of all, before I put this up here, surprised Alabama was the number 1 overall seed over Houston or Kansas.
Not terribly. Conference win their conference tournament. Houston obviously has the injury concerns. Kansas, dealing with the Bill Self situation. Hopefully he's okay. I think he is okay. They don't win their conference tournament either. So no, not shocking that Alabama's the number 1 seed.
Yes, this is the region up here. I'll go through the match real quick. In Birmingham on Thursday, Alabama's in the winner of the first 4 rounds between Texas and Corpus Christi, South Missouri State. Maryland, West Virginia, 8-9 game in that pod. Orlando, Thursday games, 5-12, San Diego State and Charleston. Virginia, Furman, 4-13 game. Friday in Denver, Creighton and NC State, 6-11. Baylor, UC Santa Barbara, 3-14. Then Sacramento pod on Thursday, 7-10. Missouri, Utah State, and Arizona and Princeton. That's the South region. What jumps out at you here?
Yeah. First off, I want to say I have a couple of upsets in this region. I think you could see a team like Charleston, who really ran through the CAA. They win that conference tournament. They won 30 games this season. I think Charleston is a team that can make a run to the Sweet 16. Actually, I really like their draw against the San Diego State team that always seems to be here in March. But then if they can win that game, they get a Virginia team that I don't think is very good. I was watching them last night against Duke. They struggle to score the ball still offensively, and you never know when you're going to have a Virginia game where they're held to 40 or 50 points. I think Charleston can actually get past them. I don't really think it's a very tough draw for Alabama. Honestly, I think you're playing an 8-9 seed. Maryland and West Virginia, neither one of those teams really strike me as all that great. And then you could potentially get a Charleston, a San Diego State, or a Virginia in the Sweet 16. So I actually like Alabama's draw a lot. Looking at the bottom half of that bracket, I think it's a pretty tough draw actually for Arizona. They play Princeton in the first round. I'm not going to pretend like I know a whole lot about Princeton in the Ivy League, but in the second round, they get a Utah State team that finished 18th in KenPom. They were the 13th best offensive team in KenPom. They can score the ball against Arizona, so that could be a potential upset. I think Arizona gets by them, but that could be a really tough game for Arizona. But if they can get by them, I think they can get to the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, pretty easily, because the rest of that region, the rest of that half of that bracket, I don't love Baylor that much. I think Creighton actually could upset Baylor. So I'm looking at right now in the South. I think I could see Alabama versus Charleston, Creighton versus Arizona, and I actually see Arizona getting through and going to the Final Four.
Yeah, interesting here. Some thoughts I want to add here. It's that Maryland West Virginia game. Whoever gets through that game is going to give Alabama basically a big beating physically, because these teams are probably the roughest teams in the country here.
Yeah.
I also think I love Furman's chances to beat Virginia round one. I think also a very experienced Furman team, a lot of upperclassmen on this team. They've been on knocking the door of the tournament the last couple of years. They finally got in, beat Chattanooga this year. I would not be shocked if Furman wins that game.
Yeah. I would be shocked if Virginia actually wins 2 games and gets through, because I think of one of those 3 teams, Furman, like you mentioned, Charleston, like I mentioned, or even San Diego State, I think one of them is knocking off Virginia. I think they are ripe to be upset by one of those 3 teams.
All right, here. So you want to continue going through the top seeds here? You want to go to the West region, the Midwest region here for Houston?
Sure, yeah, we could do that.
All right, so we mentioned here Houston, controversially, it's as the Sun going ahead of Kansas on the S curve here. So here's their pod here. They're also in Birmingham, Alabama on Thursday. They're taking on Northern Kentucky, the 16 seed. Iowa, Auburn, the 8-9 game there. Friday in Albany, Miami and Drake in the 5-12 game for that region. Indiana and Kent State, you're on your favorite Cinderella's here. In Greensboro, North Carolina. Iowa State against the Mississippi State Pitt first 4 winner. Then Xavier, Kennesaw State in the 3-14. Bottom of the bracket, Texas A&M, Penn State, 2 of the hottest teams in basketball right now. I'm in Des Moines, taking on the Texas Colgate in the 2-15. So this region, I feel like there's a lot of potential in it.
Yeah, this is good luck picking this one. I think there's honestly 3 to 4 teams that could come out of this region. I want to start on the bottom, actually. This is a tough draw for Texas. And I thought Texas, and I still think they might be a Final Four team, but this is a really tough draw for them. Colgate, I absolutely love Colgate. If you follow me on Twitter, I'm a Matt Langle guy. If St. John's doesn't go the way of Rick Pitino, I would love for them to go in the direction of Matt Langle. He's a phenomenal coach. Colgate, second in the country in field goal percentage and first in 3-point percentage. They're the only team in the country that shoots 40% as a team from 3-point range. They can get hot at any time. That's a tough matchup for Texas. That's a Colgate team that has been in the NCAA tournament a couple of years in a row now. I think it's 4 of the last 5 years they've been in the NCAA tournament. They're a senior-laden team. They have this experience. That's not going to be a cakewalk for Texas, especially if Colgate shoots the ball the way that they're capable of. And then, like you mentioned, that 7-10 game, Texas A&M and Penn State, 2 teams that got to their conference tournament finals. I think Texas A&M is way underseeded. I saw most people have them as a 5 seed. They're a 7 seed, probably to set up that second round matchup with Texas. And then Penn State, a team that's playing out of their minds right now, nearly knocked off Purdue in the Big Ten final it's going to be really, really tough for Texas to get out of that pod and into the Sweet 16. If they can get into the Sweet 16, though, I think it gets a little bit easier. I'm not completely sold on Xavier. I think that they're a good team. Played really pretty well in the Big East tournament, but I'm not totally sold on Xavier or Iowa State. So I actually think if Texas can get out of that first pod, I think that they'll have a good shot at making it all the way to the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. I don't think the draw is very tough for Houston. Like I mentioned, I'm all over Kent State. I think Kent State, they won 28 games this year. They've won 20 plus games in 4 of the last 5 seasons under Rob Senderoff. They're 38th in KenPom defense, so they play defense. And if you look at their non-conference schedule, they played this Houston team, they played Gonzaga, they played Charleston. All 3 of those games in the non-conference were within 7 points. They've played these teams tight. They played this Houston team tight. I think Kent State is a team that could make. We always see a double-digit seed making the Sweet 16. I really think Kent State is the one that can do it out of this region. So that's kind of my breakdown of this region. If I had to pick, I think I would still go with Houston, probably over Texas. So I might go chalk, but if there's going to be a region that maybe we could see some chaos, I think it could be in this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I do think also coupling up point out here is like Houston, the Marcus Sasser injury is a big deal. We don't know how he's going to be because if
Yeah.
right that second round game against potentially Iowa there, like Iowa gets hot, oh boy.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. It's all going to come down to Sasser. I mean, because we saw them in their conference title game without him. He just makes such a big difference for them. They really did not. They looked a little bit lost without him in losing to Memphis. So that's going to be really the injury to watch. I think he'll be okay from what I'm hearing, but who knows? But if he's out, it makes their road really, really tougher.
Yeah, and we saw what Iowa did to Michigan State a few weeks ago, and they were down like double days with 40 seconds to go and won the game in overtime, which is absurd. So,
Yeah, that's a team that definitely doesn't quit.
yeah, I also point out I like that pod down here. I think it's a lot of fun. In Texas, you worry about that a little bit because like they went through the wars of the Big 12. They went all the way to the tournament final to beat Kansas here. They're gonna get run up and down the gym by Colgate, which is probably one of the fastest teams in the field right now in terms of how they play here. And you wonder if like they just run out of gas in that second round matchup.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like all 3 of those teams. It's kind of what we just talked about with Virginia. Like all 3 of those teams could knock off Texas, and I really, really like Texas, but that's just a brutal pod for them to get out of because. I mean, Colgate, obviously, you would never pick a 15 over a 2, or maybe some people would, but I wouldn't. But then, that 7-10 matchup, Texas A&M and Penn State, those are 2 good teams. That's going to be really, really tough for Texas to get out of.
Yeah, but I think if like we talk about earlier, but that's a pod you want to go to. That's definitely a high one up on the board. Right now, going that Des Moines pod.
Yeah, you're gonna get 4 really good or 3 really good games out of that pod.
All right, next up here is the West region. The top seed out here is Kansas, and controversially, because I think Jay Phillips was arguing, Jay Wright was arguing on the show on set days that quad one win should matter here. They don't in this case. Kansas is the top seed here. They play Howard in Des Moines, Arkansas, Illinois, the 8-9 game there. An Albany pod's a lot of fun on Friday. St. Mary's VCU, the 5-12 game. The game that's going to get the attention around this area, UConn and Iona, the 4-13 matchup. Friday in Denver, 6-11, TCU against the Arizona State Nevada winner. Gonzaga and Grand Canyon, 3-14. Then the bottom of this pod here, Northwestern and Boise State, UCLA, UNC Asheville, both in Sacramento on Thursday here. So what do you think about this group?
Yeah, I mean, what sticks out, being East Coast guys, of course, UConn and Iona in Albany, that's just awesome. That's going to be a sellout for sure. I might even think about making the drive up there to see that game if I can get tickets. That's the focus there. I actually do like this draw for UConn though. Man, they're going to have a tough game with Iona for sure. But then they can play a St. Mary's or VCU team that I think that they can beat. And I actually see UConn making a little bit of a run here. Wouldn't shock me if they actually even upset Kansas. I really like this UConn team. They have so much depth. I watched them. I was at all of their games in the Big East tournament this year. They play really, really hard, but they have so much depth. They have 8, 9, 10 guys that they can go to. So I don't know if I think that can play to your advantage in the NCAA tournament when you're playing a couple of games in a row. It's just a matter of can Danny Hurley actually, manage that depth correctly, because that's obviously a big thing for them. But that's a really, really fun game. On the bottom half of the bracket, I love UCLA. I really think that UCLA can make a run here. Despite all of their injury concerns, I still love the way that they play defense. Jalen Clark is out for the year, but they're the best defensive team in the country. And I still think that holds up. They really should have beat Arizona in the Pac-12 title game. They had so many chances in that game to win. So I do think that they'll get by UNC Asheville and Northwestern and Boise State. Neither one of them really scares me. On the bottom half of that region, I actually see a decent amount of chalk. I think that we see UCLA and Gonzaga. On the top half, I think we're going to see UConn, like I mentioned. So I think it's going to be Kansas and UConn. And I could see UConn actually knocking off Kansas and going to the Elite Eight. But at the end of the day, I'm probably going to say UCLA is my team to beat in this region.
Yeah, a couple things I'll point out here as well. We'll go back to that Iona UConn 4-13 game. The thing I think I watched this game here is like, can UConn handle the Iona press? Because that's really, I think, the key to this game here. Is I think if they break the press, they'll beat them pretty easily because they're much deeper than Iona is. But like Iona is like top three guys in them of Danis Jenkins, Walter Clayton Jr., and Nelly Jr. Jones. I was like, not many mid majors in the country have a group as talented as that three.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at mid-major talent, or I guess you could say even low-major talent across the country, Iona is probably one of the most talented, low-major teams, mid-major teams in the country. So that's a tough game for UConn at first, and then you're playing a St. Mary's team or a VCU team that could give you trouble. UConn I think could be kind of similar to Texas, honestly, where it's like if they can get out of that pod, I really like their chances. But yeah, if there's a pod to go to, it's that one right there because you're going to get a good game in St. Mary's VCU, and then the spectacle of the NCAA tournament. That's why we tune in, right? UConn and Iona, Hurley versus Patino in Albany should be a sold out crowd. I'm really looking forward to that game. I think it's 4:30 on Friday. Really can't wait for that one.
Yeah, I think they screwed up not putting that game in prime time. I think that
Yeah, shocked. I thought that was going to be like the 7:15 or whatever CBS tip. I was shocked that was not the Friday night CBS game. That they put it at 4:30. I was really surprised by that.
I'm surprised they even just flipped the pods and put this at nights, and more you get more of these fans from the local area to get there.
Exactly. Yeah, I was very very surprised by that. I thought that was for sure going to be the night game.
Yeah, absolutely. Here now, let's go ahead here to the last region here, the East region here, which I think this one has a lot of chaos potential in it.
Yep.
Here, we're gonna go. Obviously, our final number one seed is Purdue. Here, they win the Big Ten tournament with the Big Ten regular season. They're in Columbus. They start off with the Texas Southern Fairleigh Dickinson first four winner. Memphis, Florida Atlantic, a fantastic 8-9 game. I'm really excited to watch that one here. Thursday night, the primetime CBS game, Duke Oral Roberts in Orlando, the 5-12 game. Duke not getting Greensboro also is amazing when you think about that.
Yep.
Yeah. Tennessee, Louisiana, 4-13, that pod. Friday in Greensboro, Kentucky and Providence, the 6-11 matchup. K-State, Montana State. Friday in Columbus, Ohio, Michigan State and USC, Marquette, Vermont. That's the group here. This is a lot of fun, and I'm gonna shoot my shot here. Purdue's not getting out the first weekend.
Oh, I agree 100% with you. I think you mentioned the chaos. I think we agree on that as well. This is going to be some chaos. We're going to see something, and I 100% agree with you. That was the first thing I was going to say. Purdue is going to lose to Memphis or FAU. I don't know which one's going to beat them because that game is such a toss-up, that first round game, but one of those two teams is going to beat them. We always see this with the Big Ten in the NCAA tournament. I actually looked through some numbers. The Big Ten has had 44 teams in the NCAA tournament in the last 6 seasons. 2 of them have reached the Final Four, and only 4 of them have reached the Elite Eight. The Big Ten just does not win in the NCAA tournament recently. They're always consistently overvalued by the committee, and they always let us down. And I think Purdue is going to be the latest example of that. They're a one-man team. They have Zach Edey, who is, to his credit, the best player in college basketball, but no one else. Like this Purdue team is Zach Edey, and if Zach Edey doesn't have a fantastic game, or even if he does, they might lose. He's the only guy on their team averaging more than I think 11 points per game. He's the only guy on their team averaging more than I think 4 or 5 rebounds per game. He is their whole team. They're a one-man team, and I just don't see a one-man team making it all the way to Houston and the Final Four. So I think Purdue is getting knocked out, like you mentioned. I think Duke actually has a really, really good shot. This Duke team plays defense. I think they have their highest defensive KenPom ranking in the last 4 years. They play good defense. You saw it against Virginia. Obviously, Virginia is an offensively challenged team, but Duke plays tough defense. I think Duke is going to get out of their pod over Tennessee, or over Oral Roberts, which is a really tough game. Like we mentioned off air, Oral Roberts, undefeated in conference play, just completely ran through their conference. But I do think Duke gets through that pod, and I think Duke goes all the way to the Elite Eight. I think that we could see even a Kentucky team making a run here too. Kentucky over Providence and over Kansas State. I do actually like Marquette a lot on the bottom half of that bracket. They're playing so hard under Shaka Smart, a team that was picked 9th in the Big East preseason, but just do a lot of the little things right. And really ran through their last game. Won an impressive game on Friday night against UConn in the Garden in what was almost a road game for them in the Big East tournament. So they proved a lot to me. But I actually like Kentucky to make a little bit of a run there. But at the end of the day, I think Duke is my pick there out of that region. I think it's going to be chaos, like we mentioned. We're going to see a lot of upsets because if you run through this bracket right now, I mean, Purdue, the 1 seed is whatever, but Memphis FAU is a toss up. Like we mentioned, Oral Roberts could upset Duke. I don't think Tennessee is unbeatable with Zakai Ziegler out. They're not unbeatable. I think they're a little bit overseeded, to be honest with you, as a 4. Providence over Kentucky, the Bryce Hopkins revenge game wouldn't shock if Providence knocked them off. Kansas State, Montana State's whatever. Michigan State, USC is a total toss up. So like there is like 6 of the 8 games in this region in the first round are complete toss ups. Like nothing would shock me in the East region. You could tell me Purdue gets through. You could tell me Memphis makes a run, Duke makes a run, Kentucky makes a run, Kansas State, Michigan State, even with Izzo, being his month, Marquette making a run. You could tell me 5-6 teams in this region could make a run to the Final Four, and it would not surprise me. I think this is the region where we just see chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do think Duke high variance, in my opinion. They can lose this game to Oral Roberts to be the Final Four. That's number 1 for me. Tennessee's not getting out of the second out of the weekend, regardless of who gets out of that Duke Oral Roberts game. They're going to be Tennessee, in my opinion here. And I think K-State's a little undervalued here. I feel like there's a 3 seed in this region here. I do think that like Kentucky has been hot and cold all season long. They're training a little cold now. Providence is like up and down as well. I do think that like I would not be shocked if they're sitting there in the Elite Eight with a chance to play their way into the Final Four.
Yeah, would not shock me at all. My fear about K-State is I feel like they may have been playing their best basketball a little bit too early in the season, but at the end of the day, yeah, Kentucky is so up and down. Like they just you never know which team you're going to get. One game they'll look like a team that's going to make a Sweet 16, Elite 8, and then another time they look like a team that shouldn't even be in the field. To be honest with you, so that second round game could be really really interesting if Kentucky can get by Providence. I think Providence honestly has that's going to be a fantastic game. Kentucky against Providence. Providence, a team that 2 weeks ago was comfortably in the field, and then today they were basically sweating that out. I think they were kind of like the last team when they revealed them that it was like, okay, we're in. It was kind of down to them and Rutgers, like who's going to get left out here. When you look at their performance at the end of the season against Seton Hall, and then they lose that Big East tournament game against UConn, Providence is not playing their best basketball either. So that Kentucky and Providence game is going to be really, really interesting to me.
Absolutely here. And one more thing, Marquette ended up playing very well here, but you mentioned it before. Tom Izzo on that second day of the pod when he has like less than 48 hours to prepare for his game, he's very good in those spots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tough draw for Marquette for sure. Having to go through Michigan State or USC, but if they do have to go through Michigan State, man, we know how good Tom Izzo is in these situations. Michigan State, I think, has kind of underperformed for a good portion of the season, but at the end of the day, going against Tom Izzo in the second round, not going to be easy. But I do think we're going to be set up. The East Regional is at the Garden this season. I think it's no surprise that you have Duke, Kentucky, Michigan State, and Providence in this field because they're hoping that one of those teams or multiple of those teams could get in. We could potentially see Duke, Kentucky, and Michigan State all playing in that pod in the Sweet 16. Would be really really cool for the Garden. I'm sure the NCAA is hoping for that.
Yeah, I'm sure they as much as they say they don't, they do like to go for the theatrics a little bit with some of these draws.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and UConn Iona is the perfect example of that. You can't tell me that wasn't done for the theatrics. And seeding Texas A&M as a 7 seed, two seed lines lower than everyone said that they should be to set up a potential Texas A&M Texas second round game. It's very obvious that some of these things are done for the theater and for the television.
Yeah, so let's go ahead here. I put the TV schedule up here as well. I did pull that here. CBS has the graphic up here. So Thursday early, Maryland, West Virginia is our first game of the day. Furman, Virginia is at 12:40. Utah State, Missouri, Howard, Kansas. That's the first block. Second block, the Alabama game, Charleston, San Diego State, Princeton, Arizona, Illinois, Arkansas. I feel like this is an okay start.
Yeah, nothing really crazy there. I think the best game of that kind of pod right there is probably the Charleston San Diego State game. But yeah, that Maryland West Virginia game is just I always joke with some of my friends, that first 12:15 tip off game on Thursday, you're gonna get it wrong no matter what, no matter which side you're gonna get it wrong. You can be on. You could pick that game 100 times, or they could play that game 100 times. You will pick that game and be wrong like 99 times. So just accept that you're going to get that game wrong. You're going to get off to a bad start and move on.
Yeah, so that's the first window. Second window here, Auburn, Iowa, 6:50. Oral Roberts, Duke, the CBS headliner game. It's in the early slot there. Colgate, Texas, Boise State, Northwestern. Second half of the night, Kentucky, Houston, Northern Kentucky, Louisiana, Tennessee, Penn State, Texas A&M, UNC Asheville, UCLA here. I feel like in this one, like watch that Texas pod on TBS. That would be my advice if you have one TV.
Yeah, and those early games, the first four that you mentioned there, Auburn, Iowa, Oral Roberts, Duke, Colgate, Texas, and Boise State, Northwestern. That's a really good Thursday night opener. Like we mentioned, Auburn, Iowa is a complete toss up. Oral Roberts could upset Duke, or Duke could roll in that game. You got Colgate and Texas, kind of the same thing, and then Boise State, Northwestern, another toss up. So that's four really really good games on Thursday night.
Yeah, that's a very fun window here. Friday day window here. USC, Michigan State, the first game of the day on CBS. They love to put Tom Izzo in that early slot whenever they can.
Yep.
Kansas State, Xavier, UC Santa Barbara, Baylor, VCU, St. Mary's, the first four. Second four here. Vermont, Marquette, Mississippi State, like the first four, Mississippi State, Pitt, and Iowa State. NC State, Creighton, Iona, UConn. The second window here is also, I think, pretty stacked.
It is, yeah, and like we mentioned, man, I wish that UConn game was a little bit later. Was that 7:10 on CBS or the 7:25? I wish that was a little bit later. Like you mentioned, I don't really understand why they couldn't move that game to the 7:25 window on TBS instead of Drake in Miami. But I guess obviously they have to keep the pods aligned and everything. But I agree. I wish that game was a night game.
And I would have just flipped it, put like this one like at the 7:25 game, and then put the VCU St. Mary's game late, because it's also better for the St. Mary's fans not to get up at 11 a.m. to watch their game.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. They could have completely done that, and it would have made sense. Yeah, put Drake Miami in the early window and put that one later. Yeah, not that scheduling. I don't get. I'm sure that they want to keep it aligned, I guess, but I really do wish that Iona UConn was a later game. But nonetheless, that's a really good afternoon slate on Friday.
Yeah, Friday night here. No shocker here. Providence, Kentucky, the Friday night game on CBS. It's the same slot that Kentucky was in. They lost to St. Peter's last year. It's a little deja vu.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, so that's them here. Texas Southern, like the Purdue first four winner here. Drake, Miami, Grand Canyon, Gonzaga. Late window here. Florida Atlantic, Memphis, Montana State, K State, Kent State, Indiana. The first four game against TCU here. So I feel they did a good job backloading some great games into the back of that Friday night window. There's usually a dead zone in some of these tournaments.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was last year maybe that there was some rough games at the end of that Friday night. But yeah, like you mentioned, there's a couple of really really good games. That TCU, Arizona State, Nevada game that's going to be a complete toss up. And then we got my Kent State team. I think that they're gonna knock off Indiana, the late night game on Friday night. That's my one to watch for sure.
And Florida Atlantic, Memphis, 9:20 roughly.
Yeah, yeah. Another just complete toss-up game. I mean, who knows who's going to win that game? What a season for Florida Atlantic and Memphis as well. I mean, knocking off Houston, finally getting past Houston and winning the American. Again, a team that I could see. I really do think the winner of that game is primed for a run to the Sweet 16. So we'll see who gets through.
And also Memphis in that eighth slot again. Remember last year they gave Gonzaga a hell of a hard time before they lost to them.
Yeah,
So like they could be looking to revenge, avenge that mistake and taking out one seat this year.
exactly. Yeah, they've been in this spot before. They know how to play in this spot. So that could be a really really fun second round game if they do get through Florida Atlantic.
Absolutely here. Troy, thanks all the time. Really appreciate it. People want to follow you on social media. How can they do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at Troy Mauriello. Mauriello is the last name. If you're a college basketball fan, I'm sure if you're a St. John's fan, you follow me on Twitter, you're probably listening to this. I do tweet a lot about the Red Storm and their upcoming coaching search. So definitely check me out on there.
Yeah, if a certain coach does get hired by St. John's, the podcast make a return for a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. We will be doing something if and when that potentially does happen. We will definitely be doing some content. So be on the lookout for that.
Absolutely. So if you any of you seeing red folks, like don't unsubscribe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, stay tuned. Follow me on Twitter, of course, or just keep tabs on my Twitter because we will have something whenever they do eventually hire a new coach.